Welcome to This Explainer. If you've ever felt completely and utterly drained by having to navigate really loud, demanding personalities, whether that's in your personal life or honestly just sitting in a boardroom, you are in exactly the right place today. We're going to unpack some genuinely fascinating insights from our source material on human behavior, and we're going to completely flip the script on what it actually means to be strong. We live in this incredibly noisy world, right? And it always feels like the loudest person in the room wins. Meanwhile, accommodating other people can just feel exhausting, almost like a burden. But what if we've been looking at this entirely the wrong way? Let's just dive right into this with a quote directly from the text that perfectly sets the stage. Truly strong people don't fear bowing their heads because they know victory is decided by results, not attitude. Just let that sink in for a second. Listen to that strategic focus. The people with actual real power, they don't care about looking tough. They care about results. And that brings us to a really uncomfortable question. It's one that a lot of kind, naturally accommodating people secretly worry about in the back of their minds. Is adapting to others a sign of weakness? Like if you're constantly changing your behavior to suit the mood of the room, does that mean you just lack a core sense of self? Well, that takes us to section 1, the dilemma of identity. Do you accommodate or do you push? To figure that out, we first have to look at the trap that literally all of us fall into. Society basically sets up this giant no-win situation for us. On one hand, if you're the person constantly accommodating others, people are super quick to label you as weak or say you have no core. But then flip it around. If you push your own way and totally refuse to bend, suddenly you're labeled selfish or arrogant or just plain egocentric. Neither of these options feels right, and living in that awkward space between them, it can make you feel completely out of place no matter what you do. Moving right into section 2, adapting is not weakness. It's actually a hidden superpower. And guys, this is the massive paradigm shift we really need to talk about. Because what society so casually dismisses as being weak is actually your absolute greatest asset. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that yielding to others is not about losing yourself. Not at all. It's actually a highly advanced cognitive social skill. Think about it. To adapt, you have to read the situation perfectly. You have to intuitively grasp the atmosphere of the room. You have to calculate and choose the exact right words for that highly specific moment. You aren't just blindly following the crowd. You are making quiet, highly strategic judgments in real time. That takes immense mental agility. Now, contrast all of that mental agility with this brilliant reframe from our source material. Stubbornness is often just failing to notice changes in your environment. Man, that hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? We all know that one person who rigidly crosses their arms and declares, well, this is just how I am, take it or leave it. We tend to think those people are so confident. But actually, scratch that, often they aren't strong at all. They're just missing the social cues. They literally lack the bandwidth to notice that the room is shifting around them. All right, section 3, the self-centered illusion. Do they have friends? Let's zoom out and see how this plays into our broader social dynamics, because we need to debunk a massive myth about those loud alpha personalities. We always tend to assume that strong, pushy, self-centered personalities just naturally draw a loyal crowd. I mean, they always seem to be holding court, right? But do they actually have more friends, or is the whole thing just a complete illusion? Well, here is the reality behind those crowds. The self-centered person absolutely attracts people, sure, but look closely at exactly who they attract. It's mostly easily influenced followers and people who just want to be told what to do. It's a subservient dynamic. It is not a relationship of equals. Now compare that to the adaptable person. They make everyone around them feel incredibly comfortable. People naturally think, wow, it is so easy just being with this person. Because they aren't pushy, but they still retain their core. They build this deep, unshakable trust. They forge connections between true equals, which is the only way to build long-lasting relationships. As the source so elegantly puts it, it's not about the number of friends, but the quality of the relationship. The adaptable person always wins the long game of human connection. They might yield on the surface to keep the peace, but they never, ever yield their core values. And ultimately, that is what draws genuinely high-quality people into their orbit over time. Which brings us to section 4. The strategy of humility. Professional secrets. Let's take this concept out of our personal lives for a minute and see how it acts as a literal secret weapon in professional environments. Because in the business world, the difference between these two approaches is stark. On one side, you have people focused entirely on attitude. They want to look dominant. They want to project this intense, don't mess with me vibe at the conference table. But the source points out that this yields almost zero long-term return. It's just short-term intimidation. On the flip side, the quiet, adaptable people are completely focused on results. They really couldn't care less about looking like the big boss. They care about the actual numbers. And at the end of the day, the numbers dictate true success, regardless of who shouted the loudest in the meeting. In fact, intentionally taking a lower stance, choosing to act humble, is a brilliant tactical maneuver. When someone steps back and says, oh, I still have a lot to learn, they instantly lower their opponent's guard entirely. By masking your true strength, you aren't triggering anyone's defensive ego. Nobody feels threatened. That allows you to safely sit back, observe the room, and figure out what everyone else is really thinking. Because no one is pushing back against you, it facilitates much deeper, completely unhindered progress. And that brings us to what I think is one of the most powerful concepts in this entire explainer. Your invisibility is your ultimate weapon. Because your true depth is completely unseen, people don't know to fear it. They don't block your initiatives. You get to achieve your goals silently. And by the time the loud, arrogant folks finally realize what's happening, you've already won. All right, Section 5, the power of quiet strength, redefining true power. This is where we bring all this evidence together for the big picture. We really need to completely redefine what it means to stay true to yourself, because it absolutely does not mean aggressively shouting your opinions at every given opportunity. The real definition? It means adapting your surface behavior to perfectly fit your environment while keeping your core values and your long-term goals completely unshaken. You can smile, you can nod, and you can blend in flawlessly with the crowd without ever once betraying who you really are inside. And let's think about how this builds into a long-term life strategy, especially when it comes to your energy. If you choose that loud and arrogant approach, your energy cost is going to be incredibly high. It takes a massive amount of physical and mental exhaustion to constantly assert dominance over everyone. And the long-term result? You just end up creating enemies and superficial alliances. But the quiet and adaptable strategy? The energy cost there is low fatigue. It is a highly sustainable, low-stress way to live. Plus, the long-term result is steady trust and rich, deeply meaningful connections. Our source material leaves us with this really beautiful realization. In a noisy world, quiet depth is rare and irresistible. As the era we live in just keeps getting louder and louder, and as more people are desperately clamoring for attention, your quiet, observant, adaptable nature actually becomes incredibly valuable. People are just naturally drawn to the magnetic mystery of someone who is calm, someone who doesn't feel the neurotic need to constantly prove themselves to the room. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. The very next time you find yourself gracefully adapting to a challenging room or a difficult conversation, please don't criticize yourself for being weak. Recognize that you are deploying a high-level strategy. Will you let your invisible strength win in the end? Embrace your adaptability. It just might be the absolute greatest asset you have. Thanks so much for exploring this topic with me, and keep leaning into that quiet power.